Buenas tardes. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for your invitation. It's really an honor and a pleasure for me to be here with you today. I've seen that the title of the cycle of conference is the Panorama de las Ciencias Atmosféricas, and I will try to give you some kind of panorama of the aerobiology, at least the part we are doing in Switzerland. There are many other different aspects that I have no time to tackle today, but if you wish, we can discuss, and I can give you some information about what other colleagues do. Very interesting things indeed. So first of all, I have to present you briefly the group. The research and the work doesn't go alone with one single person. So here are my colleagues, Regula Gehrig, Andreas Pauling. Regula Gehrig is responsible for the climatology analysis of our pollen data. Andreas Pauling is dealing with the modeling, dispersion modeling with CosmoArt. I will show you some results. And Benoit Cruzy is young in the team, and he is working on the development of the automatic pollen monitoring. And this is a team of technicians responsible for the pollen counting in our country. So their work is incredibly important. If they don't do a careful job, then we cannot have results to analyze and to work with. Can you see that? Yeah. Okay. That's briefly what I will discuss today. First, a short presentation, and then I will show you our monitoring network, then the products we show for the public, for the physicians, for the users of our data, then something about the climatology and forecasting and modeling, and at the end, what is very new is this automatic pollen monitoring system. So, I am from Switzerland. Probably you know this is this very small country in a central Western Europe, where you have a lot of mountains and where all people eat chocolate and are watchmakers. That's why I was expecting you all wear a sombrero and a poncho, but I was disappointed when I arrived here. Okay. Still, Switzerland is a country of mountains, and they occupy a large part of the country here. The southern part of the Alps has a more Mediterranean climate. We have the Swiss plateau at an average altitude of 500 meters, where you have a strong, the winds are really from southwest or from northeast, and you have a second range of smaller mountains here called the Jura Mountains. We are in two slightly different worlds. You are more at the university in the research, and at MeteoSwiss, so the Swiss National Weather Institute, we are more in the operational world. Since these two are very complementary, and I'm very happy that we have still the opportunity to collaborate at least to some research. So our core activities are the monitoring, the forecasting, and to produce the production of different products, for weather information that the whole institute, weather, climate, and warnings in case of problems. So our customers are all the users, so the authorities, the public, the companies, the weather companies, the airports, etc., as in every country. Switzerland is a very small country, 50 times smaller than Mexico. So more or less 200 kilometers north-south and 300 east-west. And this is our monitoring network with different systems for the meteorology, for radars, for remote sensing, and also different pollen traps. Just a few words about the phenology observation networks. This started in 1951, and we have 160 stations where volunteers regularly every week they go outside and they observe the developments of the vegetation, and they record and send us the information about 26 plant species and 69 different phases, such as flowering, leaf opening, or fruit ripening in autumn. This is typically the different phases cover the different periods of the year from January to December, more or less. So this gives us a good overview of the way the weather and the climate influence the vegetation. These are all trees and herbs. The weather and climate influence the vegetation along the year. And another typical case we have in this network is the observation since this is a long time series of observations since 1808 of the bud burst of the horse chestnuts in Geneva. And you see during the 19th century it was good to announce the spring and at the beginning of April. And during the 20th century, these dates was earlier and earlier. And in recent years, we had again a slight delay because we had no more so warm winters. But don't see in this picture the climate change or the climate change alone. This is probably much more about the city climate, the illumination during the night, and maybe a contribution of the pollution too. So something very, very tricky to analyze. But still, these results are not observed in Geneva, but in many other cities and much bigger cities, the impact of the city climate on the phenology. Yeah.
Yeah, one question. So the bud burst, it responds to temperature or radiation more?
Essentially, I don't know in this case. This is a long time series, but the observation is on one single tree, or different trees, one after the other, and it was not studied in that case. But I think temperature could play a good role, yeah, a good part. Okay, we come to aerobiology now. This field is defined as the study of airborne particles of biological origin. And it's focused on the sources, the liberation, the dispersal, deposition, and also impact of this particle on the environment or on living organisms. So it's very multidisciplinary. So I'm not a specialist. I'm more someone who does many different things, who is in contact with many different people, and that's what I consider as particularly interesting in my domain, is to be in contact with many different specialists, different scientists from different fields. So I was trained as a biologist, it was mentioned, but now I'm collaborating with meteorologists, with physicians, allergists, with modelers, etc. And this is extremely what makes this interesting part of my job, I think. So these are we won't go into the details of this, but you can see that aerobiology has a part of botany and something that deals with the source of the particles that are present in the air, with meteorology and climatology, which are responsible for the for the emission or for the transport of this particle, and different fields that are maybe the users or that use our results to better respond their problems. And this is the case in particular in medicine, in allergology, because you know probably that the pollen is the main allergen source in the air and responsible for most of the airways inhaled allergies. Just one slide to promote a little the International Association for Aerobiology. It was created in 1974 after the works of the International Biological Program on Aerobiology. And the members are either individuals or societies, such as the Pan-American Aerobiology Association, the European Aerobiology Society, or the Indian Aerobiology Society. There are a couple of other, I don't want to make it a long list. And the main activities are to organize the quadrennial congress, so a congress every 4 years since 1978, and the next will be held in 2 years in Italy. So welcome if you want to visit Italy in 2 years. And the other aspect is to organize aerobiology courses. I think it's very important to train the young students. Okay, here you are very lucky, or I feel you are very lucky because you have really a chair for aerobiology in your university and you have a group working on that. But it's not common in all the universities to have such a teaching. And also, in particular in Europe, where you have many small countries, we thought some years ago it was important to have these courses to bring everybody at the same level of knowledge in this field. And you can have a look at the website for more information. So if you type Aerobiology International in Google, you will find it. So we will now go into the core after the introduction. Yeah. So traditionally, what is still you find a lot of papers in that with that practice. So you have a monitoring, you have the analysis, and the monitoring analysis are done with manual methods. And then you have time series, and you have a study of these time series and the influences of weather, climate, or others on these time series. But already in at the beginning of the international aerobiology in 1971, another idea was behind. So the idea was to have an understanding of the processes that are in the atmosphere, from the emission, from the sources, the emission of the particles, how they behave, how they are transported, how they interact maybe together, and then how they disperse and what is their impact. You can see that in this scheme with the monitoring and the weather, the biological components, the physical components to the weather are here, and the different submodels and the integration of all these submodels in one model. It was a very good idea, and for a long time all the different parts have been studied more or less separately. And now we are at a time when we have the tools to put all this information together. Still we need more, but in one or several models to trying to integrate all these aspects, and you know that probably from this. So we want to get this. We are at the time where we can start to have this comprehensive vision with a three-dimensional time and space resolved composition of the atmosphere. Okay. This is a bit of vision still. The present state is still the monitoring with traditional manual station. This is our network in Switzerland with trap for that run more or less the whole year. And special traps, these yellow points for the ragweed. We had some years ago, in the 2000s, ragweed coming from northern Italy and from southeastern France to Switzerland. And then it was detected because we found more and more ragweed pollen in our traps in Geneva and in the south of the Alps. And then we started to have an interdisciplinary groups in this area just to fight against this new plant, this invader, whose pollen is extremely allergenic. So it was a whole story that is for this afternoon or this evening if you have time. Why we have such a monitoring network in Switzerland is because during the 60s and 70s, the allergists in our country had more and more allergic patients, allergic to pollen, to grass pollen first, and later to birch pollen and to other different types. And they considered necessary to know to what the patients are exposed to in order to be able to cure them, and they built the network. And some years later, in '93, they gave this network to the MeteoSwiss so that the network could be run by, let's say, specialists of the monitoring and not by physicians, allergists. They have better time to cure the patients or to take care of the patients instead of monitoring the pollens. So I think it was a very good move. And briefly, I won't talk about the allergy today because I think it's a different field and I'm not an allergist, so I could tell you stories, but it's not the main. Still, the data we produce are used for the diagnosis, for the treatment evaluation, and for the clinical studies in allergy. So for example, the companies who want to develop new medicines to cure allergy have to, when they compare their results, they have to know what was in the atmosphere to be able to say, for example, if a patient, you give a medicine to a patient and he has no symptoms, it's fantastic. Is it the medicine or there was nothing in the air or less pollen than usual and he has no symptoms because of that? So that's the use of these data. And also for information, education of the patients, of the physicians too, for the early warning and the preventive medication and planning activities. This kind of information allow the people to take holidays in a possibly area free of allergens if they are specifically allergic. But you have all this kind of information in Mexico too. When it goes about pollen monitoring, what we want is to, as for all monitoring, we want to have a representative sampling. We want to identify the different pollen taxa because allergy is very specific, so it's different if you are allergic to ash or to birch or to grass. Poor people who are allergic to all the different types, but it doesn't solve the problem. And another challenge is the outdoor conditions and the reliability of the instruments. And another problem that we discovered in particular when we tested the new automatic system is that we have no good reference. The manual monitoring we are doing is very good, it's very useful, but still we don't know what is the truth. So we compare different systems, we have different results, and we try to understand which one has a part of the truth or the best part of the truth at different moments or for different reasons. Excuse me, I will just... Okay, pollen grains. Probably there are among you some people working with pollution. And traditionally with pollution, you study the aerosols smaller than 10 microns. what I was told is the reason is because the others, the bigger particles are quite difficult to measure, difficult to manage. And that is what we try to do, because most of the pollens you find in the air are bigger than 10 microns and up to 80 or more microns. So it's not very easy to be representative. And another difficult aspect is that airborne pollen concentrations are relatively low compared to other types of particles, which means that you need to sample a high volume for representative sampling. And if you suck in a high volume, then you have a huge number of other particles you have to discriminate just to find out your pollen grains. So with the microscope, with the traditional method, it's okay, it's easy. But when you want to have an automatic system, it's something very different. So the method, I don't know if you know that, but it's easy. It's a very robust and manual system. The air is sucked in here by the pump, located here. This is the system, the Hirst-type trap, always face the wind. And the air is tucked in, and the particles are impacted just behind the orifice on a sticky surface that is on a drum, and the drums revolves in 1 week. So you change the drums once a week. You go to the lab and you count. You mount the sticky surface that is on the drum under the microscope, and you can count the pollen grains. Pollen grains are quite easy to recognize. Easy when you do that every day. Not easy for the first time, but okay. What's the part which makes the biggest error in this kind of measurements is you can count the pollens on only a part of the surface where they are deposited, pollen grains or fungal spores or other particles. So this subsampling is responsible for large part of the error you have in the measurement. Okay, I start now to present you the tools we have developed, and we took the advantage of the tools developed by our colleagues in climatology. These are different tools for different weather parameters, and here pollen and phenology. And from the data we produce every day or every week, depends, all these information are automatically calculated. So all the averages, graphs are automatically produced, so we can have for the forecast a very good basis of information. And in addition, we have also the models, of course. But this is just the analysis of the data. Hopla. Sorry. I want to present you a long list. You will see some of these products during the presentation. One I like very much. It's useful to understand where we are during the season. We have 1 year, and in gray you have the quantiles of the 20 years before. So for every day you have the different statistic probability to have a certain concentration of this kind of pollen. Here it's grasses in Geneva, and you have the year. And the red in gray, these are the quantiles. This dashed line is the maximum that was measured, and in red you have the values of this year. And you see, for example, that for grasses, this year we had very high concentration at the beginning of July, and this was the highest peaks we had at this time of the year in the last 21 years. So this is, I think it's a very good tool for us to know where we are during the season and what kind of seasons we have. Because the people ask frequently, is it a season with high pollen load or low pollen load, or is it late, is it early? All the questions we get, in particular from the journalists. We present on our webpage different informations, basic information on the network, on the different results of this analysis, so the phenology and the pollen, and also of the CosmoArt forecast, so the forecast model for pollen. I will come back to the model later. Just a few words about these pollen calendars. They look very traditional, but my colleague just developed a new method recently. It was presented at the European Symposium in Lyon 2 months ago. She based these calendars on many years of data, and she defined a window of time and a moving window to calculate this kind of calendars based on the different classes of exposure we have considered in collaboration with the allergists. So these classes are typically no pollen, low concentrations, moderate, strong, or very strong. And you see these different seasons with the probability of having, for example, strong grass pollen concentration in May and June. And the model is made so that it is automatically renewed with the new data every week. And also, you can use as many years as you like, as many stations as you like, as many data are necessary. So everything can be configured in order to produce the pollen calendar you wish. So okay, I say that, I will skip. On the internet, for the public, we present in collaboration with the patients' organization. We'll present the forecast, a text forecast that includes some recommendations how to behave, how to avoid different pollens. For example, at the beginning of the season, they are present at low altitude. Then on the weekend, the people can go to the mountains and have a release of the symptoms. And they are also the weekly data and the seasonal data are present on the website. And another very important information for the patient. Sorry, I don't have this in English or on the website, so I choose French, but I think you understand the idea. This is the start of the flowering. So when in the year should we expect to have the first birch pollen, the first grass pollen? And this is the forecast in this column for the different cities, and this is the average date. And we have models that model phenological models, so basically cumulative temperature models that for that purpose. And this information is important for the people because they can go early enough to the doctors to have the medicine or to be prepared for the pollen season. Also a weekly email newsletter and different apps on the smartphones. This one presents the same information as on the internet, and this one is interesting in the sense that patients, the people who have allergy, can every day tip the symptoms. So today I have problems with the eyes and maybe with asthma. And all this information are used by the physicians to compare when the people had the symptoms and what was in the air. Was there pollen but also pollution? They can receive all the data. And then you can design a specialized forecast for these people. If one person is allergic to grass but not to the other pollen types, she can receive the forecast only for grass, for example. Okay, to produce all that, we have to have some analysis of the data, And I would like to now to make an excursion to the climate change maybe, and the results of the pollen. No, Papa. So I have to use this one. Excuse me. Where? Can you see it? Ah, here. Yes. Great. And just to start this story, I want to show you two things. This is the pollen concentration of hazel in Geneva last winter. We had very mild temperatures in November and December, and as you see here, the hazel pollen season started already in December, and at the same time I received phone calls from people who are allergic to hazel, saying, "Hey, what's happening? I have already symptoms." From doctors who said, "Hey, my patients have symptoms." And from our monitoring stations, we got this signal. So a very special year this year because of the elevated temperatures at the end of the year. Later, it was cold again, and then the season lasted longer. But you see, we had a very huge peak at the very beginning of the season. And this is something different. You have the pollen data of two cities, Münsterlingen, and you see with these dark bars the pollen season of alder. This was 2011, I think. But it repeats every year. So the principle, the season of natural alders that are present in our forest is end of February and March. In this city of books, they planted a special alder, a hybrid, that is very resistant, very good to be planted in this city, is heat resistant, stress resistant, salt resistant, etc. But the problem is that these trees flower 1 month earlier, and this prolongs the allergy season, the season of exposure to alder pollen. So it increases the risk for sensitization, and it increases also for the people who are living in this city or in this area the risk for having allergy. So in the first case, in this example, you have the hazel pollen, something more or less natural, and you have the impact of the climate change. And in this case, you have something which is natural, the natural alders, but something which is not natural, which is the introduction in the cities, very near the people, of a new species, of a new variety of plant with allergenic pollen. So the message is, be careful what you plant in your cities. And I've heard you have exactly the same kind of questions, of situations here, and I heard that also in many different countries. In Central Europe, birch is certainly one of the two main allergens with grasses. In the city of Lyon, where we had the symposium 2 months ago, 3 years ago they created a big place, and they planted there 300 birches in the center of the city. To have some birches, okay, you will have pollen in the air, but it's maybe not necessary to plant such a big source of pollen just under the nose of the people. And the idea, the way to have only the same tree, okay, maybe for the look, it's interesting, but I think in that case, for the exposure to pollen, it's not a good idea. I would like to just to make a short abstract of the factors affecting airborne pollen concentrations. A large part of this concentration is due to the pollen source and their distribution and density. So where you have the plants producing pollen, you will have, and they're emitting pollen in the air, so you will have pollen in the air. That's very easy. Everybody can understand that, I think. But it's very important to remember. It's very important for modeling too. And this distribution is in large part dependent on the climate and also on the soil on which the plants are growing. And before and during the flowering and the pollen season, again, the weather and the climate are very important because they will drive the speed of the growth of the plants, of the development of the buds, and the time of the flowering. And their temperature, also other factors, sunshine duration, etc. But the temperature play, in particular in spring, an important role to determine the timing of the season. And from one year to the other, in spring, we can have a season that is 1 month or more than 1 month early or 1 month later. So it's a big difference for the people affected. In particular, for some trees where their season lasts 2 to 3 weeks, if you have more than 1 month variations, it's quite important to know in advance. And during the pollen season, the release in the air and the dispersion and transport and deposition are mainly driven by wind or humidity, so the conditions that are immediately available in the air. And there are other factors that influence also this production and allergenicity, in particular the pollution, the CO2. We know there are many studies showing that the increased concentration of CO2 will increase the pollen development, the plant growth, and the pollen production, and that the pollution also impacts on the pollen contents and the production of certain allergens of certain species. I recommend this review by Ziska and Bex 4 years ago on that topic, but there are many papers on that topic, climate change and pollen. If we consider all the papers that were published, I think we can say that the main impacts on the climate change on the airborne pollen are the change in the timing of the pollen season, so earlier start and peak in spring, and longer overall pollen season. Not a longer season for each of the different species or pollen types, but an overall season from the first flowering pollen to the last flowering. We will discuss a little bit the change in pollen amount, but it is expected that the climate warming produce more pollen, in particular because of the increase of the CO2. Important also is the change in pollen quality and the possible change in pollen spectrum. If the climate will change enough, then the vegetation will change also, and the people living at the same place will be exposed to different allergens. So the change in the timings of the pollen season, I think it's real. We have this strong correlation between temperature and the start of the pollen season in spring. But so it means with higher temperatures in winter, we have observed seasons starting earlier in the year. But in some areas, such as the northern and continental areas, we observe a later start because the trees or the plants growing there require longer chilling. And if you have a lack of chilling, then the plants will start their growth and development later. So you have regions where you have later start. So you have regional differences, and this is not always the same results. And pollen seasons can also become shorter for example, in case of dry spells, we had in 2003 a long dry spell in Switzerland, and all the grasses were dried, and then the pollen season was finished, almost finished at the mid of June, very early. And another aspect, there were quite mild winters in the 19th and the 2000s. And at this time, we had very strong, we have quite short time series, but we had strong trends towards earlier start of the pollen seasons. But what we see here is that these trends are no more significant. But now that we have 30 years data, after 20 years, the trends were significant. So it's also a bit tricky to analyze trends on too short time series, and even 30 years is very little. But that's what we have in the field. So we try to do the best to extract the information from these data. Change in pollen amount. This is very tricky. I think, to be short, there is an influence of the climate change that will be have a slow development. But the impact of the land use and the agricultural practice and urbanizations and the plantations of trees or other is much more important at local scales. So you have sometimes increasing trends, you have decreasing trends, but at the end it's a local process and not an impact of the climate change, or not a general impact of the climate change that we are measuring in our stations. And one review paper they took data from many different 97 stations in Europe, and they could show increase for different pollen types, you see, and decrease for others. And they could find no signal with any temperature change, but only with urbanization. So it means that changes at local scales are more important, influence more these trends in the pollen concentration than the climate change at a general scale. For the moment, maybe it will change one day, but for the time being, it's the situation. Just show you a few results from Switzerland. You see that this is 1989 and 2015. You see that in the first part of the series and until the 2000, from that time we have doubled the quantity of birch pollen in the air. And this is an average of different stations in the western part of the country. In the same area, the plantain, so a weed, has shown an important increase. And in the southern part of the Alps, we had this decrease of the pollen concentration year by year, and in the last years we have again an increase. Reason for that? No idea. When there was a decrease, we said, okay, the agricultural practice has changed. Before they made hay, and now they are making silage, and this has changed the way the pollen is produced in the atmosphere, etc. But it appears, I'm not sure they are back to the hay production again, and still the concentration are increasing. So we have to find an explanation for that. And in northern Italy, which is very much infested with ragweed, they had this situation 3 years ago. Sorry, I'm missing a leaf beetle. A beetle was released in that area, accidentally, of course. But it occurs that this beetle eats the ragweed selectively, so act as a biological control of the plant. And you see it was released, probably it started in 2012 or 13, and you see in the last 3 years the amounts of ragweed pollen were very, very low, in that area. So it impacted also the pollen we receive with the southern winds in Switzerland. And pollen quality, so as I mentioned, the higher temperatures and CO2 concentrations, increased concentration, can result in higher allergens in the pollen grains, higher allergen contents, and also other molecules involved in the allergic reactions. There are many papers, just are cited a few here, and also same situation with the increased air pollution. There are some pollutants that increase the production. So many allergens are stress proteins, and then if the tree or the plant is under stressed conditions, then the concentration of allergen will increase in the pollen. That's one of the common explanations for that process. Here an example of a ragweed placed in vegetated areas, in the near low traffic roads and high traffic roads, and you see the increase of the allergens in the pollen grains. So, as an abstract, pollen from the country is probably nicer than the pollen from the city. And the change in pollen spectrum, we don't see that very much. There are slow shifts in natural vegetations, in the herbs. In the trees, we don't see very much. We see much invasions of invading plants, but we don't see slow shifts. So probably at a certain point, there could be sudden events that can change the vegetation, but still here in the south of the Alps, with the change, this is the decrease of frost days and the increase of exotic species. But these exotic species are also planted in that area. So again, here the anthropogenic influence is very important. Carmen, may I ask you the time?
Almost 1 hour.
Well,
You have 5 minutes.
okay. So I have to hurry up. Okay. So the message: be very careful with the plants you have in you plant in your areas and the way you manage the environment. No, there is something. Do you see here? Okay, I will run. So we are, for the forecast, we are using this modeling, this model Cosmo Art. And you see that this is a model made for the forecast, for weather forecasting, and the pollen is a very tiny part of all that. So I will skip this and show you the main parts of the model. So what was developed specially for the pollen. So a model based on temperature sums define the start of the flowering as the same for the forecast and for the end, and models the length and duration of the pollen season. So we have an information of the state where we are in the pollen season, at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end. And this is a mathematical function. Then we have a model for the emission of the pollen, which depends also on weather parameters, on the actual weather, and of the distribution of the plant, as I mentioned before. And we have this module for the pollen emission. And at the end, the model, the Cosmo model was developed, also integrates the dispersion and transport of particles. And you have this in the, you can follow the pollen concentration, you have a transport budget, and the sedimentation and washout are integrated. So this is just to show you the good match of the model and the observation for the start of the pollen season. Here for grass in Zurich. this is just the description of the pollen season, how it is described in the model. You see on the picture, it can be calculated for each grid point of the model, the state, present state of the flowering. So at the beginning of the season, it's the birch here is flowering only in the south, if it is present. There are very little birches in this area. Then later in the seasons, the birches are flowering in the Central Europe, and later in the season, in May, they are flowering mainly in Northern Europe. These are the maps of the distribution for birch and for grass. So this is a very important component of the model. And this is how it is present. This is the emission. So we used really the biology, the factors influencing the release of the pollen, to put this pollen in some kind of reservoir, because the pollen is released but is not always immediately transported in the air or dispersed. And we have a second part describing the meteorology, and mainly the wind, the turbulence conditions that will take this pollen and disperse it in the air. We have this model operational at a 7-kilometer resolution since 2011 for birch, and then for grasses, for ragweed, and for alder since that year. And what is very new this year is also that we run the model at 1-kilometer resolution over the Alps. These are the results: are 2 hours resolution, 6 hours aggregated to 6 hours. For example, a station, this is grass pollen in a station in Dinan. Red is the model, and black is the observations. We see quite a good combination. Here a station in Switzerland, in Lausanne, with different parts of the birch pollen season. We see here that the very first high peaks were missed, but from the rest of the season it was quite okay. And these are the results for the Cosmo 1 model. This is the Cosmo 7. And what is changing is mostly the topography, and the precipitation, but we had to redevelop the description of the season, the plant distribution, and we have to use pollen boundaries because the model domain is much smaller with the 1 kilometer. And this is the results to 1 kilometer resolution, how it looks. Briefly, the influence of precipitation. This is grass pollen over the Alps, Alpine region, and here over Europe, Cosmo 7-kilometer resolution. We have this big area with rain, and you see on the right the rain in the model, and you see how better it is defined in the different valleys. You see, you can have the pollen in different regions. When you are at 7 kilometers in the Alps, you see almost nothing. I will skip this, just show you for this city that is in an alpine valley. In the model at 7 kilometers resolution, so the city is at 600 meters altitude. In the model at 7 kilometers, it is at 1,400, and in the Cosmo 1 kilometer, it is at 700 meters altitude. So it's much more the reality with the 1 kilometer, of course. And this results in a season that starts more or less on time and follows much better the reality, the measurement. Okay, I'll skip we have a very good collaboration, and we provide these forecasts and the outputs of the model for the surrounding country, Italy, Germany, Austria, and France. Okay. Just what we need in the future to do from the monitoring side will be to better estimate the emissions. And in most of our networks, we are not measuring emissions, and I heard that, Carmen, you will do that. And we are doing that for other species, and I think it's very complementary work. It's fantastic. There are problems with the distribution and density of the stations, because all this manual counting takes a lot of time, and the data are available quite late, after 1 week. Then they are not available for the modeling in real time. And so we need to develop the data assimilation, and maybe also measurements in the third dimension, so in the vertical direction. For the moment, there are only a few experiments with airplanes or drones, but it's not monitoring, it's just tests. That's why we're working in recent time on automatic pollen monitoring. Not because it's not good what we do with the manual system, but because we need real-time data for the model and also to inform the population at the right time. And also because with these systems we can increase the sampling and have a better representative sampling, maybe to have hourly data instead of daily data. Whoop. This is the place in Payerne where we do these tests. And in the last years we have tested different systems, but I will focus only on the last one we have selected. This is an airflow cytometer using fluorescence. You see the pollen grains, the particles, all the particles present in the air are sucked in with the air, and they go through a nozzle, and they cross first two red lasers, and this part is responsible for the scattering. And then the same particles is shot by an UV laser, and you have these 32-channel photodetectors, and this is responsible for the measurements of the fluorescence of the particles. And from all these raw data, we developed a method to an analysis. We calibrated with fresh and dried pollen. And I will go very fast with this part. This is the results of the calibration. So the expected size of the particles we see, of the pollen we see, and the measured size, and you see a very good correspondence. Here, using other features delivered by this monitor, for each particle you have more than 70 data produced for each particle. So we use this data set to try to recognize the pollen. And here you see that all the pollens in that part have huge, some quite important surface ornamentations. And all the pollens in that part are smooth, have a smooth surface. So it shows that we can find some features to try to identify the pollen. And this is the fluorescence. And of course, the general spectrum is the same for all the pollen types. Here you have only a few examples. You have a huge variability, but also you have different features, some aspects that you can use to identify the different pollen types. For example, if you have a fluorescence at a higher wavelength, then it's probably not a quercus. And we use both the different machine learning algorithms to classify these particles. And for example, support vector machines and the artificial neural networks. And they give quite good results, basically, with 80% precision and recall. And by combining the two, we can increase this precision and recall to almost 90%. And these are, at the end, the results, what is probably the most interesting. This is the total pollen concentration, automatic in both violet and manual in yellow. And you see, this is the season 2015. And we were very happy this year that all the good results we had last year's were confirmed and extended. And we were very happy also that the system functions very reliably, we had no problem with the machine. So these are the results from 2016, from this year. Very good match for the total pollen concentration. Total pollen is not enough. Simple machines can do that. So here just a slide to show you that we can have this hourly data, and I compared, you see the difference between the hourly peaks and the average of the day that is usually presented, or the usual outputs of the pollen monitoring. So I think in the future, with such systems, the relationships between the exposure on the time of exposure and the symptoms can be much better understood. And some results for grass pollen last year and this year. I think for grass pollen, the machine works very well. Very good results for beech and for pine too. Still, we have to work on the data to better understand the season of the birch pollen. But we had also good results with hazel. I won't comment this now. So as a summary for that automatic pollen monitoring, we have real-time data. We have hourly data instead of daily data that we produce usually. We could identify several pollen types during 2 seasons. Still, we need to work a lot on these data because we get data for all the particles coming into the machine, which is reliable. But what we want to explore in the future, we have the same data sets also for all these other stuff in the air. So the spores, fungal spores, maybe some pollutants, maybe some aerosols. Basically, the machine has the potential to count also the PM10, the PM2.5. All that needs to be explored and verified and checked. So this is the outlook. We have the proof of concept completed for some of the pollens we are interested in, and we were introduced now these machines in our networks. We're just applying for money for that. And we will test the next generation of detector from the same company, which has much improved in many different aspects. And we want to explore the other particles. Now, at the end of this month, I will receive 3 of these new machines to test the use for the monitoring the air pollution, and also pollen, of course. So, yeah. Many other stories I could tell about other different kinds, but I have to conclude. So I have 2 messages I would like you keep today. The first one is that it's not only a natural process that expose the people to allergenic pollen, but in many cases the impact of human activities is very important. Then it means also that we can have a positive influence, or we could control if we would do that, if we would do something for that. But it's possible to do something. And the other aspect is that in many countries, and I'm very glad that it's not the case in your country as you are expanding your networks, that's really very good news. But in other countries, the funding for the networks is not secured. The state is not always responsible for that in many countries, also in Europe. So I think it delivers very important information for the people suffering from allergy and for other purposes too, such as climate change. I think we need to support these networks and to develop regulations and solve the financial issues that are linked with that. With that, I thank you for your attention, and if you have questions.
Thank you very much. Preguntas,